So, Bitcoin. We hear about it all the time, right? Mostly as this thing you can invest in. But to really get what it's all about, you've got to look under the hood. Today, we are pulling back the curtain to see how a single Bitcoin transaction actually works, from the very moment you hit send all the way to its final locked-in confirmation. And this is the fundamental question, isn't it? I mean, with our normal money, we trust banks, we trust governments to keep track of who owns what. But Bitcoin? It has no CEO, no central office, nobody in charge. So how on earth does this purely digital money move from me to you, safely, without a middleman? That's the big puzzle we're going to solve together today. So here's our game plan. First, we're going to start with this core idea of a shared digital notebook. Then we'll follow one single transaction and see the journey it takes. After that, we'll get into the wild world of the miners' global lottery that powers this whole thing. And finally, we'll see how all these pieces click together to solve the biggest headache for any kind of digital money. All right, first up, let's get right to the core innovation that makes Bitcoin even possible. It's this amazing technology that lets a huge network of complete strangers all agree on a single source of truth. Now, the official name for this is the blockchain. And at its heart, it's really just a record book, a public ledger. But the magic word here is distributed. It's not kept in one single bank vault. Instead, a copy is shared across a global network of thousands and thousands of computers.
In this analogy, the shared digital notebook really makes it all make sense. Just imagine a notebook that everyone on the network has a perfect, identical copy of. When a new transaction happens, a new line is written in the notebook, and bam, instantly, everybody's copy gets updated. You can't just secretly erase an entry because thousands of other copies would immediately prove you're wrong.
So let's break down that name, blockchain. Each block is basically a page in our digital notebook. It's filled with a list of recent transactions that have all been checked and verified. And the chain? Well, that's just how these pages are linked together, one after the other, in a super strict chronological order. This is what creates that permanent, unbreakable history. And this link, it's not just like staples or glue, it's cryptographic. Every new page, every new block contains a unique digital fingerprint, it's called a hash, of the page that came right before it. It's kind of like each page has the DNA of the previous page embedded right into it. And here is the knockout punch. This chaining makes the whole notebook effectively tamper-proof, or what people call immutable. If you tried to go back and change just one tiny detail on an old page, its digital fingerprint would change completely. That would instantly break the chain, and every page that came after it would become invalid. To pull off a change, you'd have to rewrite the entire rest of the notebook, all while everyone else is still adding new pages. It's a practically impossible task. Okay, so we've got our super secure digital notebook. Now let's see how a new entry actually gets written in it. We're going to follow a single transaction from the very beginning to the very end. And to make this real, let's bring in our classic characters, Alice and Bob. Alice wants to send some Bitcoin to Bob. Now on her phone, it probably looks super simple. Just type an amount and hit send. But in the background, this really complex and elegant process is just kicking into gear. Her transaction is about to go through 5 key stages. It starts with initiation in her wallet. Then comes this crucial step called signing. After that, it gets broadcast out to the entire world. Then it's picked up for mining. And finally, it gets its official confirmation. Let's zoom in on a couple of these.
That signing step is where Alice gives the official green light for the payment. She uses a secret piece of code called a private key to create a digital signature. Now, this is nothing like your handwritten signature, which can be forged. No, this is a unique piece of cryptography that proves with mathematical certainty that it came from her and only her. It's impossible to fake.
So after Alice signs and broadcasts her transaction, where does it even go? Well, it enters this place called the Mempool. And you can just think of the Mempool as a massive, chaotic, global waiting room. Alice's transaction is now just sitting there, floating around with thousands of others, all waiting for someone to pick them up and process them. So who does the picking up? This brings us to the real workhorses of the Bitcoin network, this decentralized army of bookkeepers we call miners. They're the ones who are going to pluck Alice's transaction out of that waiting room and write it into the permanent record book. Miners really have 2 incredibly important jobs. First, they are the transaction processors. They're like auditors, checking all the transactions to make sure they're legit and to prevent any fraud. And second, they are the only ones who can introduce new Bitcoins into the world, and they do it on a very predictable schedule. But here's the thing. Miners don't just get to add transactions whenever they want. They have to compete for it. And the system that runs this competition is called proof of work. It basically forces miners to burn a massive amount of real-world energy and computing power to earn the right to add the next page to our digital notebook. The absolute best way to think about this is like a giant global lottery that's happening every 10 minutes. Thousands of miners are all racing at the same time to solve this incredibly difficult math puzzle. And the more computing power you have, the more lottery tickets you basically hold. The first one to shout bingo and find the solution wins the prize. So what's the prize for winning this lottery? It's called the block reward, and it is the economic engine that drives this entire system. It's made of two parts. First, the block subsidy, which is a big chunk of brand new, freshly created Bitcoins. And second, all the little transaction fees paid by people like Alice whose transactions made it into that winning block. This reward is what pays for all the computers and electricity, and it creates this powerful incentive for miners to play by the rules and keep the network secure. Okay, now let's connect all the dots. This whole elaborate system, the notebooks, the digital signatures, this crazy global lottery, it was all designed from the ground up to solve one huge historical challenge. And that challenge is called the double spending problem. You know, with a physical dollar bill, you can't spend it twice. Once you hand it to someone, it's gone from your pocket. But with digital files, what's to stop you from just copy-pasting your digital money and spending it over and over again? For decades, this risk was the main reason we just couldn't create a true form of digital cash. So here is Bitcoin's absolutely genius three-step solution. First, every single transaction is announced publicly to everyone, no secrets. Second, miners compete to lock those transactions into a time-stamped block, creating a single definitive order of events. And finally, that whole proof-of-work system makes rewriting that history so incredibly difficult and expensive that it's just not worth it. Once Alice's payment to Bob is in a block, it is locked in for good. And this is the key takeaway. Bitcoin's security doesn't come from a trusted company or a government agency. It just emerges from the raw economic self-interest of thousands of competing miners all around the world, who are all paid to honestly enforce the rules. This is a complete paradigm shift in how we can even think about security. And this setup creates what's known as a virtuous cycle. As Bitcoin becomes more valuable, the rewards for those miners become more lucrative. That attracts more miners to join the network, bringing more computing power with them. All that extra computing power makes the network exponentially more secure against any attack. And a more secure network is seen as more reliable and valuable, which helps support its price, starting the whole cycle all over again. Which leaves us with a final, really powerful idea to think about. What if the most secure systems didn't have to rely on trust at all? The Bitcoin engine is built on this beautifully balanced system of incentives, where thousands of independent people, all just acting in their own self-interest, end up collectively creating an unbelievably secure and reliable network for everybody else.